Now, the idea of justice can include and should include the concept of mercy or grace. I use the terms mercy and grace interchangeably in this particular video, but those concepts are not exactly the same. There's a difference between grace and mercy. But for the purpose of this video, grace and mercy, I'll use those interchangeably. I'll finish up the video by talking about magnanimity, magnanimous. But that's different still from grace and mercy. So we'll handle that and make the distinction at that time. For now, let's just talk about mercy. And by that, I mean grace and mercy. Grace is it's probably the most powerful force in the universe. It's God's grace towards human beings. Humans' grace towards one another can solve so many things, much more than any kind of force or execution of justice on anybody else. You'll understand why I say that as we go along. Justice can include the idea of mercy. So, true justice would seek to balance punishment with measures to restore or rehabilitate individuals, if that's a value. Now, that may be a value in a cultural, in a justice system, and it may not. More likely than not, it's at least a value in a cultural system. And so where justice and mercy meet is where we start to see some cultural influences on the notion of justice. Idea of justice transcends our ideas of culture. So culture can change from one country to the next. Justice, however, should remain the same. Now, that doesn't mean that all the laws from country to country should be the same set of laws. However, you'll notice that the essentials of those laws are the same from country to country. For instance, there are no countries that exalt and support murder. I know what you're going to say. You're going to say there's been some cannibals in the past where murder was exalted. There's nuances to those concepts, and so that's not correct. But we won't get into that right now. Generally speaking, those things that we see in the 10 Commandments, right? Like don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't kill, right? Don't covet, that kind of stuff. Those are concepts that are accepted from country to country, which is one more reason that we should be able to see that there's an objective standard that comes from a God that has created the universe to operate in a specific way. And we can either call those laws the laws of God or laws of nature, natural law. Many people that don't want to admit of a God, they'll go ahead and admit of the laws of nature or natural law. And so we'll go ahead and use those words for people that haven't grown up into their understanding that there is a God and that God is reaching out to them. If they're still resistant to that because they want to lead their own lives and be totally in control because they're doing everything so right, then we'll go ahead and let them use the idea of natural law or laws of nature. Grace or mercy can be a complement to justice. And so when someone has been wrong, they've been hit, they've been assaulted or battered in some way, and they turn around and they actually say, go ahead and hit me again, or I'm not going to hit you back because I could crush you, right? Then that grace and that mercy would add weight and credibility to the words that they have to say, as long as they have the might to back it up, which is kind of an interesting aside. But you'll notice that someone who is kind and gracious and sweet to other people, if they do it because they're too weak to be anything other than that, they need to protect themselves by licking the boots of everybody else. That's not kind and sweetness at all. It's simply survival. However, someone who is powerful enough that they can go their own way, but they control themselves and tamp down their more basic instincts and do the right thing under certain circumstances or given circumstances, then they truly are giving grace and mercy. Grace and mercy can only have meaning then when the grace and mercy does not have to be given. It can be withheld, and the negative effects of justice can certainly come raining down upon the person that has wronged someone who is the victim of an injustice by somebody else. Forgiveness. Think of forgiveness as part of mercy and grace. It's where an individual makes a choice to tell somebody it's okay. It's not saying that what the person did to them is not wrong. It may still be wrong, but they choose, rather than to respond with vengeance or revenge, to respond with an act of kindness and grace, forgiveness, allowing the person to be restored so far as possible to that relationship that they had before the horrible event happened in the first place. All right. Here's an analogy. Legal system may impose a sentence such as imprisonment to ensure accountability and deter future offenses. We'll talk about the reasons why we punish people in the criminal justice system. Deterrence is just one of 4 basic reasons. There's more. They're trying to come up with ideas like restorative justice and love and stuff like that to say those are the reasons that we punish people. But that's a crock. It's a bunch of hooey. The 4 basic reasons that we'll discuss further in a different video would be retribution, right? Revenge by the victim or society, since the society is the true victim of all crime. Or rehabilitation, to restore, to fix somebody that has done something wrong, right? Or if they can never be fixed, but we don't want to exact revenge, we just never want them to act again, incapacitation. That would be a 3rd reason for punishment, to take away the capacity, the ability of them to commit certain crimes. Cutting off the private parts of someone who's involved in sex crimes is incapacitating that individual from committing, or deterrence. And deterrence has a couple of different manifestations. We can talk about general or special deterrence. Special or specific, you can use those concepts interchangeably. Special deterrence or specific deterrence means that if the judge points to me and said, Patterson, if you do something wrong again, if you do this in the future, I'm going to hammer you. That's a special deterrence. That doesn't necessarily apply to the rest of society. However, if the rest of society is watching to see what happens to me when I've done something wrong, I've broken the law, and the court is hammering me, then that's a general deterrence. And so the judge may punish me harshly so the rest of society can see this is what happens to people when they do stuff like what Patterson did. So that those are the basic concepts of a punishment. Justice would be figuring out which punishment is appropriate for dealing with the violation of the laws or the rules in the first place, and then bridging that gap towards society and culture and figuring out what is appropriate culturally in order to reestablish this person's place in culture, whatever that culture happens to be, whether it's a collective type culture like you might see in Asian countries like Korea, where the peace in the community is as or more important than the guilt or innocence of an individual, or whether it's rectifying wrongs and setting things right that way. So grace and justice are not mutually exclusive. They go together. I think of grace and mercy, but particularly grace. This is the slight difference between mercy and grace. Grace is being totally unmerited. Nobody deserves grace or mercy for that, and yet the grace is given. Unmerited favor. And that's what grace is all about. Philip Yancey talked about this in his book, What's So Amazing About Grace? An amazing book. I can't recommend it highly enough. Whether you're a Christian or not, it doesn't really matter. Understanding grace and the grace that has been given to us and that we should be giving to others and others to others as well. Grace is unmerited favor. Grace in action has several different manifestations, including compassion, forgiveness, right? Mercy, right? Acts of kindness that are above the boundaries of justice. So justice deals with the cold, hard facts. Was there a violation of the law? These are the facts. There is violation. What is the fair punishment for that violation? All right, what's the fair, appropriate response to that situation? That's justice. Right? And grace goes well beyond that and qualifies the rest of the world for individuals that are involved in that situation. So in the context of our discussion, we have grace that qualifies justice. Now, we've seen some people that are so far removed from the pains of society, at least psychologically, maybe not physically, maybe not even in their status, but in their mind, they're no longer going to allow themselves to be victimized by the slights of other people. We can call that magnanimity. They can go ahead and turn around and be kind to someone, even though that person has been trying to destroy them. I saw some videos this morning, for instance, when President Trump was at the funeral service for former President Jimmy Carter. And the President Trump was having a good conversation with Barack Obama. Barack Obama, who has spent the last 80 years finding different ways to destroy the life of Donald Trump. And yet Donald Trump returns to that relationship with Barack Obama and laughs and jokes with the guy. Magnanimous, right? He's above the fray. Motivation, sense of honor, desire to be noble, recognition of the inherent worth of others, magnanimity. Grace, love, compassion, desire to uplift others. All right, my student came by and we had a great little visit, but that interrupted our discussion, didn't it? I apologize for that. And so I'll get right back into it. We were talking about grace and magnanimity. Magnanimous. So when someone is magnanimous, they're too big or confident or well off or powerful to worry about the small stuff. The small stuff just doesn't really matter. So if someone hurts them, they can turn to them and be kind to them. They don't have to take personal offense. Magnanimity, that's a good thing. And the motivation for magnanimity generally is a sense of honor or great confidence and that kind of stuff. And there's good reasons to be magnanimous. Sometimes being magnanimous, however, appears to be being gracious or merciful towards people that deserve a harsher response or something like that. But it's not the same. Magnanimous is good, and it's a personal quality that we want to foster inside of ourselves as we're developing our own character and personality. But grace is something else. It's something that is not natural to us. It's not something that we humans really want to offer towards other people. We may want to be gracious towards people that we care for very deeply, the ones that we love. But someone who's truly gracious is gracious to people that they don't love, that they don't have any obligation to, that they don't necessarily want to turn into their lifelong friends. And grace comes from somewhere else altogether. We can see that motivated by love and compassion, desire to uplift others, but it's something beyond reciprocity. We don't expect someone to act in the same way towards us that we act towards them. Grace is just showing mercy and compassion towards people that don't really deserve it. That's grace. Grace that we as humans have, for instance, from God. God that has some irrational, or unreasonable desire to be part of our lives, even though we're not deserving of that relationship. So think of grace as like the sun shining on all equally, regardless of their merits and their deeds. It has nothing to do with whether someone deserves something. Magnanimity is like being generous towards somebody else that appears to be deserving or even undeserving of that generosity. We just do that because we're big enough that we don't feel the pinch of whatever their assault or their crossing the line with us might be thought to be bringing up in us. And so that's it. That's grace. We're going to be talking about mutable characteristics, characteristics that may change. That would be mutable characteristics. Immutable characteristics being those characteristics in us that cannot and do not change. There's several different implications of mutable and immutable characteristics. In the religious sphere, certainly we can conceive of the God, the creator of all the universe, as having certain immutable characteristics. Human beings also have some immutable characteristics. Sometimes we try to make mutable characteristics, in other words, parts of us that do change, they're within our control. We can choose this or that, and we want to turn them into immutable characteristics, as if it's no longer our choice to be this way or that. Why? Because people with immutable characteristics are more deserving in our mind of protections. Anyway, we'll discuss that more in the upcoming video on immutable characteristics. That has something to do with justice as well. So that'll complete this little trio of videos on justice. I'll talk to you guys very soon about that. All right? I'll get back into the house probably after the third video. See you later.